I remember sitting on the edge of my bed one night after a long, messy argument, the kind where nothing gets resolved, but everything feels said. And I asked myself a question I think too many of us are afraid to ask out loud. Would they still love me if I wasn't easy to love today? Because here's the truth. Real love isn't a reward for good behavior. It doesn't show up only when you're happy, agreeable, or put together. And if someone only loves the curated version of you, the one that smiles at the right time, says the right thing, feels the right emotions, that's not love. That's approval dressed up as affection. And approval disappears the second you stop performing. Love shows up even when you're not at your best. Real love is resilient. It can sit with your sadness, hold space for your anger, and witness your uncertainty without needing to fix it or run from it. Research shows emotional intimacy isn't built in the happy, easy moments. It's formed in the trenches of hard conversations and raw emotion. If someone disappears when you're in those moments, they weren't loving you. I've seen this play out not just in my own life, but in the data over and over again. We tend to think that relationships are made strong by shared laughter, aligned values, or physical chemistry. And those things do matter. But what truly holds love together isn't how well you get along on the good days. It's what happens when things get hard. When you're tired, moody, anxious, or grieving, when you're not performing or pleasing, do the people who say they love you lean in, or do they pull away? That's the difference between comfort and connection. People who love you only when you're easy to love are loving the performance, not the person. But people who can be with you in your shadow, not just your shine, those are the ones who see you. And here's something I've learned the hard way. When we are most in need of love, we are often least able to make ourselves lovable. Think about that. When we are hurting, we don't always show up with soft vulnerability and graceful words. Sometimes we shut down. Sometimes we lash out. Sometimes we just disappear into our own fear or pain. Real love doesn't flinch in those moments. It might not know what to do, but it shows up anyway. It doesn't always have the perfect words. It just says, I'm here. I'm not going anywhere. One woman I interviewed who had been married for over 40 years told me there were times I didn't even like my husband, but I still loved him. And I knew he loved me because when I was a mess, he made space for my mess without making it about him. That, to me, is the heartbeat of love. The willingness to stay, not fix, not flee, just stay. Love like that is not always comfortable, but it's healing. It creates the kind of emotional safety that lets people take off the armor. And when we can do that, when we can say, I'm struggling, and be met with presence instead of judgment, that's where intimacy lives. That's where connection deepens. The challenge is most of us weren't taught how to love like that. We were taught that love was something we earned through achievement, behavior, charm, or beauty. But love isn't earned. It's given. And it's proven in the moments that are the least convenient, the most uncomfortable, the hardest to hold. So if you're in a relationship where love disappears, when you're down, when it feels like you have to be okay to be worthy of affection, I want to tell you, that's not love. That's conditional acceptance. It might look like love, it might even feel like love on the surface, but when life tests it, it won't hold. Because real love, the kind that stays, that softens, that chooses you over and over again, that kind of love, it shows up even when you can't. Conditional love creates emotional armor. When love feels contingent on your mood, your body, your productivity, you start wearing masks. You suppress needs, dim your light, and silence your truth just to stay lovable in someone else's eyes. That's not connection. That's self-abandonment. What I've seen over and over again, both in the research and in the stories people share, is that when love comes with conditions, it changes how we see ourselves. When the message is, you're only worthy of love when you're pleasant, pretty, helpful, easy to be around, we begin to edit ourselves down to what's acceptable. And we don't do this consciously, at least not at first. It starts subtly. Maybe you stop bringing up things that bother you because you don't want to be seen as too sensitive. Maybe you apologize for your emotions. I'm sorry, I'm just tired. When what you really are is hurt or scared. Or maybe you find yourself saying yes when you mean no, just to avoid rocking the boat. Over time, those small acts of self-erasure add up. You start to disconnect from your own feelings, your own needs, your own voice. And once you've done that for long enough, it becomes hard to remember who you were before the editing started. This is emotional armor, and it's heavy. It's the cost of conditional love. Because when we don't feel safe to be our full selves, we build protection around the parts we think won't be accepted. We start performing instead of relating. The irony is, the more we armor up, the lonelier we feel, even in relationships. Because deep down, we know they're not loving the real us. They're loving the version of us that we believe is easiest to handle. And I need to say this, it is not love if you have to disappear to keep it. That might sound harsh, but it's actually freeing. Because when we name conditional love for what it is, we stop blaming ourselves for not being able to earn affection. We stop internalizing the belief that we're too much or not enough. And we start to see the armor for what it really is, a brilliant but outdated strategy we use to protect ourselves from rejection. Now, here's the other side of it. Sometimes the people around us don't even realize they're placing conditions on love. They may think they're encouraging us to be better, or that they're just being honest, or that they're helping us toughen up. But intention doesn't erase impact. Love that feels like criticism, pressure, or emotional withdrawal is still not love. And this doesn't just happen in romantic relationships. It happens with parents, friends, coworkers, even communities. Anywhere that love or belonging is offered only in exchange for performance, perfection, or compliance, you'll find armor. But the good news? Once you recognize the armor, you get to choose whether to keep wearing it. You get to ask, what would it look like to be loved without performing, without shrinking, without explaining myself over and over again? And that's where healing begins. Not in forcing other people to love us unconditionally, but in refusing to keep abandoning ourselves to meet their conditions. Because once you stop editing yourself for approval, the people who love the real you, the messy, vibrant, honest you, will finally have room to show up. Unconditional love requires boundaries, not perfection. Let me be clear, unconditional love isn't the same as unconditional tolerance. It means I love you, and I will still ask for what I need. I will still speak up. I will still hold both of us accountable. Healthy love isn't boundaryless. It's love that says, I'm not leaving, and I'm not pretending either. There's this myth floating around that if love is real, it should come without limits, that if someone truly loves you, they'll accept everything, put up with anything, and never draw a line. But that's not love. That's enabling. That's fear of conflict masquerading as compassion. In reality, boundaries are the framework that makes love sustainable. They're not about controlling someone else's behavior. They're about being clear on what's okay with you and what's not. And that clarity is kindness. It says, I value this connection enough to protect it with honesty. The problem is a lot of us weren't taught to connect boundaries with love. For many people, setting a boundary feels like rejection, like saying no is pushing someone away. So instead, we stay silent. We make ourselves smaller. We tolerate discomfort to keep the peace. And then we call it love. But real love doesn't require you to disappear. In fact, it calls you to show up more fully, with truth, with clarity, with courage. Here's what the research tells us. People with the most compassion also have the strongest boundaries. That might sound backwards, but it's not. You can't be generous if you're resentful. You can't offer real empathy if you're exhausted or violated. Boundaries allow us to stay kind and connected without betraying ourselves. I've heard people say, but if I set boundaries, what if they leave? And that's a vulnerable fear, especially if you've spent your life associating love with sacrifice. But I always come back to this. If someone walks away because you asked to be treated with respect, they were never really with you. They were with the version of you that stayed silent. And maintaining that version costs you your self-worth. The goal of love isn't to make someone stay at any cost. It's to create a relationship where both people are safe enough to be themselves, to speak truth, to disagree, to ask for more, without the fear of abandonment or retaliation. Boundaries are the birthplace of trust. They say, I trust you enough to be real with you, and I trust myself enough to know that I don't have to lose me to keep you. Love that requires perfection, emotional, physical, or behavioral, is a transaction, not a connection. But love that includes boundaries, that's a commitment. It says, I'm in this even when it's hard. And because I care about this, I'm going to tell you the truth, not to punish you, but to preserve us. So if you've been told that love means never saying no, never getting angry, never asking for space, let me offer a reframe. Love isn't about being easy to be around. Love is about being honest enough to be known and safe enough to stay. Boundaries make that kind of love possible. Love without empathy isn't love, it's performance management. Here's what I learned after decades of research and listening to real stories from real people. Empathy is not a soft skill. It's a courageous, soul-deep practice of being with someone where they are, not where you wish they were. Without empathy, what we call love often becomes about managing someone's behavior so they stay convenient, predictable, and emotionally tidy. We think we're loving someone when we say things like, just cheer up, or don't be so dramatic, or that's not a big deal. But those aren't expressions of love. They're expressions of discomfort. We're not leaning in. We're trying to get away from what we don't know how to hold. Empathy says, I may not understand exactly what you're feeling, but I'm willing to sit beside you in it. That's love. And the thing is, most people don't want you to fix their pain. They want to know they're not alone in it. But when we try to fix emotions, especially the ones we don't like, sadness, anger, fear, we end up sending the message that those feelings are unacceptable. We reinforce the idea that love is conditional on being emotionally easy to deal with. I've had so many people tell me I stopped telling my partner how I really feel because they'd either try to fix it or get annoyed. That's not because their partner didn't care. It's because they didn't know how to practice empathy. And without empathy, the emotional connection starves. You can still go through the motions. You can cook dinner together, watch TV, make small talk, but you're living side by side, not soul to soul. Yeah. Empathy requires presence. It asks us to be with someone without judgment, without trying to control the narrative. It's choosing curiosity over certainty, listening over lecturing, connection over correction. That's not easy, especially when the people we love are in pain. It's so tempting to jump in and try to fix or explain it away because we're uncomfortable. But the bravest thing we can do in those moments is stay. Stay when someone is crying and we don't have answers. Stay when someone is angry and we feel defensive. Stay when someone is numb and we feel helpless. Not stay to fix. Stay to witness. Stay to say, you don't have to go through this alone. One of the most powerful things I ever heard someone say in an interview was this: I knew my friend loved me because when I lost everything, she just kept showing up. She didn't try to give me advice. She didn't offer platitudes. She just sat on my porch and cried with me. That's empathy. And I get it. It's hard. Empathy is a skill, not a reflex. It takes intention, practice, and the willingness to get it wrong and try again. But the alternative, relationships where people only feel seen when they're okay, isn't love. It's image management. It's control. It's emotional distance wrapped in politeness. Love that doesn't make space for the full spectrum of our humanity isn't really love. It's performance management. And we were made for more than that. Real love shows up when things get messy. It's easy to feel love when everything is going well, when we're succeeding, smiling, when we're emotionally steady and showing up as our most put together selves. But the real test of love isn't how someone treats you when you're easy to love. It's how they hold you when you're falling apart. Because real love doesn't flinch in the face of messiness. It leans in. I remember talking to someone who said, I knew he loved me when I completely lost it, like ugly crying, yelling, spiraling. And instead of walking away or telling me to calm down, he just stayed. He didn't try to fix me. He just stayed. That moment stuck with me because that's what we crave when we're in our most vulnerable state. Not someone who pulls away, not someone who gets uncomfortable and shuts down, but someone who stays. Staying doesn't mean condoning harmful behavior or abandoning boundaries, but it does mean you don't make someone feel like they have to apologize for being human. You don't make love contingent on being okay all the time. Real love has the capacity to hold imperfection without withdrawing affection. This isn't just anecdotal, it's what the data tells us. We know from relationship research that emotional safety is built not during the highlight reel moments, but in the low points, in the conflicts, the breakdowns, the quiet disconnections that ask to be repaired. The couples and families and friendships that last are not the ones who never struggle. They're the ones who stay connected through the struggle. But staying connected requires emotional resilience. It requires the willingness to sit in discomfort, not just your own, but someone else's too. And that's hard, especially if you grew up learning that emotions were dangerous or inconvenient. If you were taught that love means always being easy, always being cheerful, always having it together, then when someone else falls apart, it can trigger your own buried shame. So sometimes people walk away, not because they don't care, but because your vulnerability awakens something in them they don't know how to face. Still, that's not your fault. That's not your responsibility to fix. And it's not a sign that you're too much. And here's what I know. If someone only knows how to love you when you're shining, they don't know how to love you at all. Because love in its realest form isn't fragile. It doesn't panic in the face of fear. It doesn't bolt at the first sign of grief or anger or depression. It doesn't say, come back when you're better. It says, I'm here even now. The people who are worthy of your heart are the ones who can sit in the mess with you without trying to tidy it up too quickly. They're the ones who don't rush you out of pain because it's inconvenient. They're the ones who know that being present for someone's storm doesn't mean you have to hold the umbrella. It just means you don't walk away in the rain. We all deserve that kind of love. Not because we're perfect, but because we're human. And being human means being messy sometimes. When you find someone who doesn't flinch in those moments, who stays when you're hard to hold, that's the kind of love worth trusting. So here's what I want you to remember. If they only love you when you're easy to love, when you're agreeable, calm, successful, smiling, that's not love. That's approval dressed up as affection. Real love is built in the trenches. It's made of eye contact when your eyes are swollen from crying. It's forged in the moments when you're not okay and someone says, I'm not going anywhere. Love that lasts isn't about ease. It's about presence. It's about people who choose you not just when you're lovable, but especially when you're not. When you're complicated, when you're contradictory, when you're real. You don't need to earn that kind of love by shrinking or striving or pretending. You just need to stand in your truth long enough to see who stays. Because the people who stay, the ones who see your mess and still see your worth, they're your people. And you deserve to be loved in your wholeness, not just in your highlight reel. So be brave enough to let go of the love that asked you to perform, and strong enough to wait for the love that lets you breathe. You are not too much. You are not too sensitive. You are not hard to love. You are a full human being, and the right hearts will know how to hold that. Good luck. And remember, you are worthy of a love that doesn't flinch.